future of publishing. Pretty exciting times. I mean, I first should probably say that I think there is a future to publishing. I think a lot of people maybe think there isn't, but I think it's a very exciting time to be involved in media. It's a very exciting time to be involved in publishing. Thanks first of all to Mia and Vince for inviting me along tonight to give me an opportunity to talk about what I think the future of publishing is. And tonight I'm just going to talk a little bit about my observations about what's happening with media at the moment and talk about where I think future publishing products need to go and where they need to start. First of all, if you're publishing at the moment, you're seeing that it's a very scary time for many people. We're seeing that advertising revenues and circulations are down, and look at, say, News Limited, 23% of their income last year was reduced from the lack of advertising spend. But as we're starting to see these changes happening within media, we're also seeing a lot of investment. We're seeing a lot of investment in making systems more efficient, trying to create systems to enable publishing businesses to survive in this market. And we're seeing that from the largest publishers to the smallest publishers. And the main reason why they're trying to do this, in my view, is that they're trying to do two things. One, of course, they're trying to maintain their profit. It's obviously very scary when you see your circulation and your revenue going down. But the main thing they're trying to do is they're trying to serve more channels, because it's clear to them, to media and publishing organisations, that the audience is out there. The problem is that that audience now is in different ways. So if we look at the consumption of media overall, what we see is that consumption of media overall is actually growing and is expected to continue growing. The only difference is that's being consumed through a whole lot of different channels and a whole lot of different mediums. And for publishers, they realise that the content that they're producing is still being consumed. It's just the need to get into these various channels. But of course, when we look at these channels, it becomes a lot more complicated than it used to be. I mean, if you're a magazine publisher today, you start to think of television as a viable channel for your content. If you're a newspaper, you start to think about computer programs being a viable channel for your content. If you're a book publisher, you start to think, oh, these recipes I have in a book, how can I make that work on the web? So channels are becoming quite interesting across the media industry, because everyone's trying to jump in on what used to be one company's channel. Of course, if you're one of these publishers trying to look into that and you start to go into these channels, you find that it's actually more and more complex. I mean, if you still just work in print, anyone working in print realises how much innovation is still happening in that area. There's a lot of stuff going on in print. If you look at the web continues to change. People are getting bigger and bigger screens. They're getting smaller and smaller screens. What you can do on the web seems to change day to day. Applications are becoming more complex. Syndication opportunities are there for publishers. The television is becoming its own platform, and you need different things depending on whether it's a Samsung or an LG. Social networks continue to appear and evolve and change. And so these different avenues for people's content, all the publishers are trying to get into those and make them work. The problem that the publishers are having, of course, is to hit all of these channels requires them to spend some money. And it tries them to spend a lot of cash. So what you're starting to find is, if you're a publisher today, this is what your profit's starting to look like. You're seeing your costs go up. If you want to compete in all of these different channels, your costs are exponentially growing. And they're growing a lot faster than where your revenue is. So if you're a publisher today, you're starting to see that it's not going to be too long before you're not making any money. Now, you can decide not to try and go into all of these channels, and if you're that, then this revenue line is just going the other way very quickly. So this is the challenge that media organisations are trying to deal with. What they're trying to do is make their businesses more efficient, so that that cost line is in line with the revenue they expect to get. And the main method that they're trying for that, apart from reducing staff, which is obviously a very scary and sad thing to be happening, but what they're trying to do is they're trying to get into a position where they're creating once. So they can create content in one way, and that can go into all of these channels, and they can execute on these new channels as they come. Does that make sense? For me, though, I wanted to talk a little bit about one of the problems, I think, in the approach that media organisations are taking to content in the future of publishing at the moment. I think that many publishers are trying to push their value of their content on the consumers. They're trying to push the same value they have in their product now on the consumers. To kind of explain that a little bit more, if I'm a big newspaper organisation, I'm making $2 billion a year, I've got it in my mind that my news content is worth $2 billion. And I'm going to work really, really hard to convince you it's still worth $2 billion. I'm going to introduce subscription models, I'm going to do a whole lot of stuff to convince you that you have to pay $2 billion for my content. If I'm a book publisher today, and where I was getting $35 for my paperback book, I'm trying to convince you that you should be paying around that amount for the electronic version. Because that's what I need you to do that. I've got all this editorial, etc. So what publishers are spending a lot of time doing at the moment is trying to convince everybody that the product they've got now digitally is the same value as what it was 5 months ago. And if you were to think about that in other industries, let's think about the iPod. I think everyone knows about the iPod. Someone would have come along and said, hey, let's create a device we can put in our pocket and listen to music. The next question they would have asked was, how much are people going to pay for that? And then they would have created a product that fits into that $200–300 that people wanted to pay. They wouldn't have gone, hey, people are paying $2,000 for a computer. How can I convince people to pay $2,000 to put a computer in their pocket so they can listen to music? The product fundamentally changed. And the challenge for publishing is that it's actually the consumer who decides the product changes. It's not necessarily the publisher who decides that. And it's hard for publishing. The reality of publishing for so long is that people sit there and think, hey, the consumers would really like this. I think the news should look like this. I think a magazine should look like this. I think that we should publish this bit of fiction content. And if I publish enough and it's good enough, then that word of mouth will spread and I'll have this great product. So it's hard when you're saying, actually, the consumer is the one who's telling me what my product needs to be in the future. That's enough about how I see the publishing world, etc. works. But for me, I wanted to talk about the product. Because for me, the product is the important thing when we talk about the future of publishing. And I think the product, what the product of publishing content is going to change and evolve, and it's going to be quite an exciting thing to be part of. And so for me, I've got 5 fundamentals, I think, when we create new publishing product. The first one is create once. The second is we need to think different. The third is we need to realise that word of mouth is now performance enhanced. 4th, we need to keep design simple. And 5, we need to keep technology simple. We've talked about creating once a little bit already. The reality is, if you're in publishing today and you're finding yourself copying and pasting, or you find yourself doing the same thing over and over again with different distribution channels, you're going to be in trouble. You're not in trouble already. So you need to concentrate on the way that you do things, invest in your workflows and all of those sort of things, so you're creating one so you can take advantage. The next part, I'm sorry to go back to Apple, but think different. Now, if you're a publisher, think different's nothing new for you. You're always thinking different. You're thinking about different content, different things that you want to have happen. The only thing I would add to that when thinking different is you actually need to think about the product. You need to think about more than just the content that's in there being different. You need to think about how that product is and how that product is going to be consumed. And more importantly, in 2013, you really need to think that thinking different is very temporary. Coming up with 5-6 year plans about how content and product is going to look is a very, very difficult thing to do. And I don't know anyone who's been successful at working out exactly what's been going on over the last 5 years. Because obviously what seems strange one day, it's going to be very normal the next day. And it is amazing how quickly that changes and that momentum continues to speed up. And brings me on to my second point, which is word of mouth is performance enhanced. It's on steroids. The speed at which word of mouth grows now is quite amazing. And people will say, well, that's social networks. Well, it's not really. Social networks have just helped word of mouth happen a lot quicker and a lot more efficiently. It's a combination of things with word of mouth. And to kind of demonstrate it, I don't think anything demonstrates that better than the Harlem. The reality is, this is absolutely phenomenal, and it really demonstrates the speed of word of mouth. On the 30th of January, that video that we just saw was published. 14 days later, there were 40,000 different versions of that video. Another way to think about that is 40,000 videos were published. In that same time, 175 million people watched one of those videos. That's 14 days. That video has made the person who created that song a lot of money. Millions of dollars, doing nothing. They just registered it out there. It just gives you an idea about how fast word of mouth is moving. And of course, the key to making sure the word of mouth moves is you need to create content that engages. You need to make content that people want to share. Now that's pretty obvious, right? That's how people have always wanted books to do that. The difference is it's a little bit faster now. You need to be able to come up with ways to engage and get people moving. You need to, in the ideal world, when you're reading the next Harry Potter or next Da Vinci Code, you want to start engaging and sharing that when you're up past the first chapter, not necessarily when you get to the end, because you want to get this momentum of things moving. And that's just the way that publishing works. Now, I've been in publishing for 18, 19 years, and I've seen word of mouth, and there's nothing better than watching a book that you bought in 10 copies and 10 years later it sold 1 million copies. Unfortunately, I've seen less and less of that. And when it does happen, it happens very quickly. And people are very, very quick to copy. The next part is keep it simple. And this is a great opportunity for me to talk about one of my pet topics, which is newspaper design, because I find it kind of interesting. If you look at the newspaper, the printed newspaper, it's kind of a marvellous thing, right? You look at the paper, you immediately see what the news is, you immediately know what's an advert and what's not an advert. Kind of gives you everything you need to know about the news straight away. It's great. Then you look at the digital version. The digital version is really interesting. Now, I like to put them next to each other because I find it kind of interesting. Why on the online version do I need to know how many people are online now and what the time is? I'm one of those fancy people with a clock on my computer, so it's kind of handy. And so that's kind of cool. Why is it when I look at the online version, it needs to tell me what type of news it is? I've got video news, Newswire, breaking news, Your Sydney News, New South Wales News. Why didn't I need to have all of these headings on the printed version? Why when I look at this, I've got login, sign up, learn more, subscribe. I clicked on all of those buttons, they all go to different places. They all kind of mean the same thing. So why is it so complicated when you move that media over? So the design needs to be simple, right? And if you can't make it simple, I know there's a reason why they put video news, because they needed to put videos in a particular bucket, right? But you need to constantly say, why can't we keep it simple? Why can't we keep design working? Now, I should be fair and say that Sydney Morning Herald have made some significant changes to their design. Not all of those things have been addressed, but a number of them have. But the key point I'm trying to make is that design needs to be simple. One of the key reasons why design needs to be simple when we talk about future publishing products is because we need to make sure it works on all of these, right? We need to make sure that the design and the brand that we're trying to communicate works just as effectively on the printed product. The printed product isn't going anywhere. It works well on small screens, it works well on big screens, it works well on PlayStations, it works well on all of this stuff. So you need to think about design in a way that says, hey, how can this translate to a lot of different things in this future publishing product I'm trying to create? And the last thing is technology. The most overcomplicated thing that everyone seems to talk about. Technology is simple. Technology has actually never been so simple. Now, with the advent of the cloud is something I'm sure everyone hears, it's almost a generic term now. Everyone goes, the cloud. All the cloud is that, one, it helps you scale and it helps technology be less. But actually what it does is it lets you take bits of technology and put them together in a logical way to create some pretty interesting and great publishing products. And the reality is, if you're in publishing and you want to make that work, you need to get the geek talking to the publisher, talking to the marketing people, and you need to engage them and get them part of the conversation. Now, in publishing, I've never seen this done well. But I've seen people talk on behalf of technology a lot. A lot of people are very good at doing that. I've seen publishers put a lot of people in between them and technology. I've even seen technology people put on boards and put on exactly the same position as publishers. But the reality is that's not enough. If you want to create publishing products of the future, you need to actually understand what that technology is. And you need to get the technology people understanding what you're doing. And they need to be, they're as vital part of the creation process as anybody else. Because you need them in order to get that content out there. You need them in order to be able to create that efficiency. You know, you could have designed the most beautiful iPod in the world, but if you didn't have all of those geeks working and understanding what they were trying to produce, you wouldn't have a product. So technology, and the biggest misnomer about technology, from my view, is that people think it's complicated and it's too much to take on. But if you're a publisher, and I don't care how old you are, where you come from, etc., technology is understandable, because at the end of the day, it's logical. And I've said to many people I work for, and CEOs, and I've worked in technology roles, if I say something and it sounds like bullshit, it probably is. And that's the reality of technology. Right? It is simple, and you need to engage. So I just wanted to kind of quickly give you an overview, etc., and just to recap on what I'm saying is that, if you're creating future publishing product, I think you need to create it once. You need to think differently. You really need to understand that word of mouth is performance enhanced, right? It's moving a lot quicker. You need to make sure that your content is engaging and allows you to take advantage of that. Design, I think that's straightforward, and get to understand technology. It's not that difficult. It used to be, but it's pretty straightforward now. So I'll close my talking to you part, and I'm hoping that there's going to be a number of questions. But I'd just like to say, look, actually, if you're in publishing and media, I just want to re-emphasize, it's a really exciting and great time to be part of it. Advertising revenue is up. I know that's hard when you hear News Limited telling you that they're down 23%, and you hear all of these people saying that, advertising market's dead. It was actually up last year, and it continues to grow. Media consumption is up. It's clear, people are consuming media more and more and more. It's part of every child's day. It's part of every adult's day. More people can read than ever have before, and if you're in English publishing, there's more people that speak English, especially in this part of the world, than ever has before. So it's a great time to be part of publishing.